From the line on the right.
Thank you, Dr. Chomsky, for taking my question. Questions about the debt ceiling. It's become increasingly obvious that we're in a lot of trouble here. And it's also becoming obvious to everyone that the Federal Reserve Bank that issues the currency is owned by a bunch of private bankers. So my question to you is, do you think it would remedy the situation at all to return the power of printing money and issuing currency to the people of the United States?
Frankly, there's a lot of feeling about that, but I really think it's misguided. I don't think the problem is printing fiat currency. That's, I mean, just in a, if you eliminate capitalism, you know, okay, then there are other options. But in a, but that's not on the agenda. We have a state capitalist economy, you know, maybe in the long term it can be worn away, maybe overthrown, I hope so. But the issue now is how do you function in a sensible state capitalist economy? And you cannot do that without a central bank that controls currency. In fact, if it wasn't for the Federal Reserve's ability to print money, we'd be in a deep depression right now, a worse depression than the 1930s. And what's, you know, since the sensible thing isn't being done for political reasons, the sensible thing would be creating demand by government investment. But for reasons that we can go into, that's not being done. In our state capitalist economy, the only alternative is the one that Bernanke has used. And if it wasn't for their option, we would be in a deep depression. Now, what's the debt ceiling issue? Well, that's, first of all, it should be recognized that the debt is not a serious problem. Certainly the deficit is not a serious problem. There are long-term problems about the debt, but they are so remote they don't bear on policy. As far as the deficit is concerned, remember, that's not the same as the debt. As Clinton left office, it's not that long ago, we had a surplus, no deficit. I mean, it's not a deep structural problem. The current deficit is the result of Bush's tax cut, the crazy wars, the virtually criminal behavior of the corporate system that led to the housing crisis, finally financial crisis. All of that has increased the deficit, but not out of sight. The deficit is, first of all, it's declining, and it would be overcome by actual growth. I mean, the government economic offices, Bureau of the Budget and so on, they calculate that there's about $1 trillion of unused capacity. I mean, the real problem of the economy is not the debt and the deficit. It's the fact that the economy is so kind of grotesque that you have tens of millions of people wanting to work and not able to. You have huge financial resources. The corporations that don't know what to do with their money, huge profits, huge bank profits. There's an enormous amount that has to be done. Just walk around any city, you can think of a million things that have to be done and all kinds, you know, just enumerate them at will. So a huge number of idle hands, enormous resources, tremendous amount of work that has to be done, and the economy is so dysfunctional it can't put them together. That's the problem. And it's destroying a generation of young people. It's severely harming the economy. Under current circumstances, the way out is pretty well known. It's to stimulate the economy through government demand, since corporations aren't doing it, and to devalue the dollar so that we import less and export more. These are methods that are technically feasible, but not politically feasible. And I think we have to ask about that. So what's the dysfunction in government about? Well, for one thing, it's called polarization of the parties. That's just not accurate. I mean, think about what's happened in the United States. You go back about 50 years, and the United States was described, not incorrectly, as a one-party state, the business party, with two factions called Democrats and Republicans. And that was pretty accurate. But something changed. No time to talk about it, but in the last roughly generation, 30, 35 years, there's been a significant change in the economy, and it's led to a change in the political organizations. We're still a one-party state, the business party. We still have two factions, but they're not Democrats and Republicans. One faction is moderate Republicans who are called Democrats. So the Democrats today are pretty much the moderate Republicans of a generation ago. You know, people say the moderate Republicans have disappeared. No, they haven't. They've just become Democrats. And the other faction was mobile. As the two parties drifted to the right, the Republicans just went off the edge. They became the party of the very rich and the corporate sector. Well, you can't get votes that way. So they were compelled to turn to the kinds of sectors of the population that I was describing before, which were always there, but were not mobilized as a political force. You know, the people terrified that somebody's coming after them, the religious extremists, the people who hate science because what do those guys know, and so on and so forth. Those are the sectors of that's the base of the Republican Party. And that's the second faction. If you look at the business pages now, the corporate sector is very concerned that they can't control their base. They can no longer control them. These guys don't care if they destroy the economy. Who cares? You know, we can win the Civil War, you know, God will help us, whatever it is. They just don't care. And it's a very unusual situation. But that's the rough political system in the United States. There's some counterparts. It's kind of similar to something that happened in late Weimar Germany, when the German industrialists thought that they could use the Nazis as a battering ram against labor and the left, and they figured then they could control them. Turned out they couldn't. They couldn't control them. And you know what happened. This is not Weimar Germany, but there's a striking similarity. And that's the dysfunction. That's what's happening in Washington. That's why the World Bank and the IMF are pleading with the United States to try to act like a civilized society. You know, because we may bring down the global economy with these two factions. That's a serious problem. Florida's right in the middle of it, so you guys see it all around you.